Welcome to Forbidden Desires channel. We hope you will have fun with us. Enjoy watching. Have you ever stared at another woman and felt it in your gut that she's not just being friendly, not just smiling politely? No, she's studying him, sizing him up, watching your husband the way you used to. And in that moment, 999 thoughts race through your mind, but none louder than this: she wants him. I felt it the first time I saw her touch his shoulder and laugh a little too hard at a joke that wasn't even funny. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe I was just insecure, tired, reading too much into things. But then it kept happening. She started texting him outside work hours, late-night messages with emojis, inside jokes I wasn't a part of, little gifts, coffee orders, birthday cupcakes. She started hovering always around him, and here's the part that surprised me the most. I wasn't angry. I didn't lash out or confront her. I didn't scream or throw plates or accuse him. I watched silently, closely, and somewhere in that silence something cracked inside me. I didn't want to fight her. I didn't even want to protect him. I wanted to understand why her eyes lingered on him the way mine used to, why her voice softened when she said his name, why she seemed to know how to get his attention when I couldn't even get him to look up from his phone. And maybe this is the part I'm ashamed to say. Maybe I wanted to know what it would feel like to let her, not to lose him, not to betray myself, but to feel something again, to be part of something that still had spark, tension, desire, even if it was twisted, because after 13 years of marriage, after the diapers, the deadlines, the dead bedroom, you start to forget what it feels like to be wanted, not appreciated, not respected, wanted. So when she kept inching closer to him, I didn't push her away. I invited her in, and the story I'm about to tell you, it's not about revenge, it's not about jealousy. It's about a moment, a choice, a desire that didn't make sense but wouldn't go away. It's about what happens when you stop pretending you're okay and start chasing the part of you that's been silent for far too long. So if you're here expecting a clean story with a happy ending, I'm sorry, this isn't that kind of story. But if you've ever felt invisible in your own marriage, if you've ever wondered who you've become and why you don't recognize her anymore, then maybe, just maybe, you'll understand me. This isn't a story about jealousy. It's about a choice, one I never imagined making. If you've ever felt your relationship slipping into silence, subscribe to Forbidden Desires. These aren't just stories. They're confessions. I'm 37. I've been married to Theodore for 13 years. He works in finance, structured, polished, always on top of things. Everyone loves Theodore. He's the guy who remembers birthdays, picks up the check, helps neighbors shovel their driveway. Dependable, predictable, safe. We live in a quiet neighborhood where the lawns are neat, the porch lights stay on, and everyone waves at each other like we're all okay. We have a 10-year-old daughter, smart, curious, beautiful. She's the glue in our little family. The reason I get out of bed some days, our home, it's warm, clean, full of framed memories. But behind those smiles on the wall, the silence grew louder. Each year we don't argue. Not really, we pass each other in the hallway, exchange quick updates. What's for dinner? Who's picking up groceries? Did you feed the cute dog? It's all polite, all functional, but it's not a marriage anymore. It's a well-run operation. He comes home late. Most nights says it's work. I believe him. Mostly he's tired. I'm tired. We collapse into bed like strangers who share a mattress but not a world touch. Has become a memory. Kisses are routine, like brushing your teeth before bed. Sometimes I lie there staring at the ceiling, wondering if this is what love becomes, not heartbreak. Not betrayal, just emptiness, no sparks, no fire, just a steady drip of ordinary days bleeding into each other like gray water. I try to remember the last time we laughed until we cried, the last time he looked at me like he saw me, not just the mother of his child, not just the woman who manages the home, me. And that's the part that stings the most, because I wasn't unhappy, but I was numb. I told myself it was normal, that this is what marriage turns into after a decade, that real love isn't butterflies. It's showing up day after day, even when it's boring. But some nights when the house is quiet and my daughter is asleep, I catch my reflection in the dark LED TV screen and barely recognize the woman looking back. There's this hollowness behind her eyes, like someone who forgot how to want things, how to feel. And then came Emma. And suddenly I wasn't the only one looking at Theodore with something in her eyes. She reminded me of who I used to be. And maybe that's where all of this really began. Started on a Tuesday. I remember because I couldn't sleep. Theodore had fallen asleep on the couch again, still in his work clothes laptop, half-open phone buzzing beside him. At 1001:47 p.m. the screen lit up. I glanced at it, thinking maybe it was a client or one of his team leads, but it wasn't. It was a name I barely recognized. Emma. Message. Hey, thanks again, for today I'll see you tomorrow. The heart at the end, it wasn't bright red. It was black, stylized, intentional. I just stared at it for a while. I didn't say anything that night, didn't shake him. Awake, didn't scroll through the thread. I just stared at that black heart and something in me tightened. The next morning I casually asked, who's Emma? He said she was new on the team, smart, energetic, a bit too chatty but good at her job. No big deal. But after that, I started hearing her name a lot more in passing in stories he shared at dinner. Stories that used to include co-workers I actually knew now. They ended with Emma said the funniest thing, or Emma handled it like a pro. Her name floated in the air like perfume, sweet, lingering, undeniable. I'd never met her, but I felt like I already knew her laugh. She laughed a lot in his stories, too much. A few weeks later, we went to one of his company events. Casual, outdoor, the kind with finger foods and string lights. That's when I saw her for the first time. Emma. She was beautiful, not overly flashy, not trying too hard, but effortlessly magnetic. The kind of woman who doesn't just walk into a room. She fills it. She wore a soft red blouse that hugged her in all the right places. Her smile was wide and unbothered, and when Theodore introduced us, her handshake was warm and a little too familiar. So nice to finally meet you, she said. Not nice to meet you finally, like she'd been waiting. And when Theodore made a joke about his bad golf swing, she leaned into his shoulder when she laughed. Not a touch, not a graze, a lean. One of those moves you can't unseen. I watched them from across the lawn for most of the evening, not openly, not obsessively, just enough. He didn't notice she did. Every time I looked her way, she caught my eye and she never looked away. First she held it steady, calm, like a dare. That night I said nothing again. We came home, brushed our teeth in silence, went Ed like everything was fine, but something had shifted from then on. She was everywhere. Her name popped up on his phone at dinner. She left little voice notes, bubbly, teasing, full of inside jokes. He smiled at them in that quiet way people do when they don't want to look too happy. And once I walked into the room while he was listening to one and he turned the volume down fast, that moment stayed with me, not because it was proof of anything, but because it wasn't. There was no affair, no cheating, no smoking gun, just a connection, a spark, a slow pull. I knew the signs because I'd lived them once a long time ago. When Theodore looked at me the way he now looked at her, she wasn't just present. She was circling slowly, confidently, like she knew exactly what she was doing. And maybe the scariest part of all is that deep down, I wondered if I wanted her to succeed. One night, long after Theodore had fallen asleep beside me, his back turned as usual. I found myself scrolling through Emma's Instagram. I don't even remember how I got there. One moment I was in bed, staring at the ceiling. The next I was deep in her feet, picture after picture, smiling, confident, effortless. She had this glow about her, not just beauty but presence. She wore red lipstick like armor. Her captions were clever. Her eyes always said more than the smile ever could. She looked like the kind of woman who never had to ask for attention. She just got it. And suddenly I was comparing her selfies against my tired eyes, her curated life against my half-washed laundry and lukewarm coffee. I zoomed in. On one photo, Theodore was in the background, fairly visible, laughing, and for the first time I asked myself a question that made my stomach turn. Has he already imagined her? Have they already crossed a line that I'll never see? But then came the twist I didn't expect. I wasn't angry, not really. I wasn't even jealous. I was intrigued. I wanted to know, what did she see in him? What part of Theodore still had that spark, that pull? Because somewhere along the way I stopped seeing it. Not because he changed, but because I stopped looking. And more than that, I started to wonder if she wanted him. Could that make me want him again? Could her desire somehow reawaken mine? And then the thoughts got murkier, darker. What if we both wanted him, not in competition, not his rivals, but together? It made no sense. It wasn't like me. I've never even entertained something like that, but I couldn't stop picturing it. Her eyes on him, his hands on her, me watching, not to hurt, not to be excluded, but to feel something, anything, because I'd been numb for so long. I didn't know what desire felt like anymore, and the scariest part, the more I imagined it, the more alive I felt. I started replaying moments in my head, the way she looked at him, the way he relaxed around her, the tension that filled the room when all three of us were in it. It wasn't just about Theodore. It was about me, about being invisible, about wanting to matter. Maybe I didn't want to ruin anything. Maybe I wasn't trying to betray my marriage. Maybe I just wanted to be seen again, even if it wasn't in the way people expect. I justified it in the quiet corners of my mind. Maybe this will wake Theodore up. Maybe this will remind him what it feels like to be wanted. Maybe it will remind me too. And if Emma was the spark, then maybe I was ready to light the match. I didn't want to destroy anything. I wanted to feel something. It was a Friday evening when I invited her. I made it sound casual, like it was just something spontaneous. Why don't you come over for dinner sometime? I had asked her at Theodore's office party the week before. She didn't hesitate. She smiled, slow knowing, said she'd love to. Theodore blinked when I told him Emma for dinner. I shrugged like it meant nothing, just a friendly gesture. But nothing about that evening felt friendly. I set the table carefully, 3 wine glasses, soft jazz playing in the background. I even lit candles, something I hadn't done in months. I wore a dress Theodore used to love, the one with the low back and the sleeves that hugged my arms. I hadn't touched it in a year. When she arrived, she brought flowers, ponies, my favorite. She claimed it was just coincidence, but her eyes said otherwise. She stepped into our home like she already knew it. Her eyes scanned the photos on the wall, the books on the shelf, the family shoes by the door. And then she turned to me and said, "It's beautiful here." Then she looked at Theodore. "I like your shirt." She bit her lip just slightly. Theodore smiled, nervous, unsure. I poured the wine. Dinner was filled with small talk, laughter that felt a little too loud, compliments that floated through the room like perfume. She praised my cooking, asked Theodore about his childhood, and when she laughed at his stories, she reached out and touched his wrist. Once, just a flicker. I didn't stop her. I didn't stop looking either. At one point she passed him the salt, their fingers brushed, and neither of them pulled away. Right away there was this electricity, but it wasn't just between them. It was between all 3 of us. It was like we were dancing around something unspoken, each of us pretending it was nothing, but knowing deep down that it was everything. After dinner, Emma offered to help clean up. She insisted. Theodore stood up to join her, and before I could say anything, the 3 of them disappeared into the kitchen. I followed after a minute or 3, quietly, no footsteps, just the soft clicking of dishes and murmured voices. I stood in the hallway. The dim light from the kitchen spilled out just enough for me to see her standing close to him, too close. She laughed at something he said, placed her hand on his shoulder and leaned in just a little. Theodore didn't pull away, but he didn't move toward her either. He looked over her shoulder and saw me. We locked eyes. He froze. She turned slowly, saw me and smiled, not apologetically, not nervously, just smiled like she knew, like she'd known all along. I walked in, grabbed a glass from the counter and said, "More wine." We finished the night like nothing had happened. Emma said goodbye with a soft hug for me and a longer one for Theodore. When we closed the door, the house felt heavy, not awkward, not uncomfortable, just charged. Like something had been plugged in and left humming in the walls. That night, Theodore didn't say much. Neither did I, but we both felt it. Something had shifted. A line had been drawn in dust and then wiped away with a single touch. Nothing had happened, not really, but everything had changed. The next time she came over, it didn't end with dishes. A week later, I invited her again. No special reason, no occasion, just a quiet text. "Come by if you're free," she replied. Within minutes, "I'd love to." That evening, I barely touched the dinner I'd made. Theodore came home late again. He looked tired, guarded. When I told him Emma was coming, he paused just long enough to tell me everything I needed to know. "She's coming here?" he asked. I nodded. "It's just dinner again." He didn't argue, but he didn't smile either. When Emma arrived, she looked different. Intentional hair, pinned up a deeper red on her lips, a soft musk perfume that hit me. The second she stepped inside, she kissed my cheek like we were old friends, then greeted Theodore with a smile that held something unspoken. We didn't sit at the table this time. We stayed in the living room, 3 wine glasses, again dim lights, a record playing something slow and vintage in the background. Emma sat first, right in the middle of the couch, not waiting to be told where Theodore sat next to her. I sat in the armchair, across legs, tucked beneath me, wine in hand, watching like I wasn't really part of the scene yet. She was relaxed, confident. She crossed her legs, turned her body toward him, and when she shifted her foot, touched his. She didn't move it. Neither did he. I didn't flinch. I didn't interrupt. I watched. I listened. Conversation floated over simple things at first, music, work, the weather. But then Emma tilted her head, looked at us both, and said, "You too, you're lucky, but also kind of wasted." Theodore looked at her, then at me, eyes wide, uncertain. I didn't respond. I just stood up, took a slow breath, and walked toward them. My heart wasn't racing, my hands weren't shaking. I should have been nervous, unsure, but I wasn't afraid. Not at all. I sat down between them, and for a long, silent moment we just sat there close, breathing the same air. Then Emma leaned in, not fast, not bold, just close enough for her lips to brush mine, a question, not a command. I didn't pull away. Neither did Theodore, and in the quiet, like the world had gone, still all 3 of us moved closer. The kiss wasn't wild, it wasn't desperate. It was careful, measured, a decision shared. But it didn't last long. Theodore broke first. He pulled away like the air had suddenly become too much. His breathing quickened. He stood, looked at me, then at her, then turned and walked out of the room. No words, no explanation, just gone. The door to the hallway clicked shut behind him. Emma exhaled softly, not disappointed, just quiet, and I sat there, still between where he had been and where she remained. I felt the warmth of her shoulder against mine, the tension still lingering in the space he'd left. And in that moment I knew whatever game we thought we were playing, it was over. That was the moment it stopped being a game. The next morning Theodore was gone before I woke up. No note, no coffee waiting, no kiss on the forehead like he used to back when we still believed in little gestures. The only sign he'd even been there was the sound of the guest room door creaking closed sometime around 2 a.m. And that's where he stayed night after night, silent, distant. One was sleeping on the other side of the house like the space between us had become too wide to cross. He didn't bring it up, didn't ask questions, didn't accuse me, didn't mention Emma, and Emma disappeared. No texts, no memes, no little check-ins. She used to send Theodore during the day. "Hope your meeting goes well." Gone. She vanished like a dream you almost remember. But can't hold on to the quiet that followed was deafening. There was no yelling, no confrontation, just this hollow stillness between us. Dinner, we'd sit at opposite ends of the table clicking silverware against plates without looking up. He answered me in clipped words. Yes, no, fine. And when our daughter asked why Daddy was sleeping in the other room, I told her he was just working late. It was easier than explaining how a kiss could break a home. Theodore started coming home later. Sometimes not at all. He moved differently, measured, careful, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing, or maybe like he didn't trust what might come out of his own mouth. He wouldn't meet my eyes. When we crossed paths in the hallway, he'd pause like he wanted to say something, then keep walking. The worst part wasn't the anger. It was the distance, the way he looked at me, like I wasn't the woman he married anymore, like I was a stranger wearing her face. And maybe I was, because I didn't recognize myself either. I used to be sure about right and wrong, about love, about loyalty, but now I just felt exposed, raw. I'd opened something I couldn't close, invited a fire into our home and expected it to warm me, not burn everything down. I thought I'd feel desired, wanted alive again. But instead I felt cold, like I'd stepped outside of my own life and locked the door behind me. I wanted to be seen, not shattered. I keep replaying that night in my mind, not just the kiss but the silence before it, the air between us, the glances, the weight of everything unspoken. And I keep asking myself, why did I really invite her? Was it to test Theodore to see if he'd pull away or fall, to prove to myself that he still belonged to me, or was it something darker? Did I invite her in because I was tired of holding everything together? Maybe I wanted to break something, not the marriage, not the trust, just the stillness. 'Cause silence can be heavier than any scream. Sometimes I wonder if it was never about Theodore at all. Maybe it was about me, about how invisible I had become, even to myself and Emma. She didn't make me feel jealous. She made me feel seen, not as a wife, not as a mother, as a woman. And when I think back to that night, to the exact moment before the kiss, I remember something strange. Emma looked at me, not at Theodore, not past me, at me, and she smiled. It wasn't a seductive smile. It wasn't cruel. It was understanding, like she knew something about me I hadn't admitted to myself. And for one fleeting second, I wondered, was I trying to share my husband? Or was I trying to give him away? Was I offering him up like a sacrifice, a desperate trade, hoping I'd get myself back in return? And if I'm honest, I don't know. I don't know if I wanted her to want him, or if I wanted her to want me, to reach for me in a way no one had in years. Maybe I wanted someone to look at me like I was worth wanting, even if it was through him, even if it was tangled, even if it was wrong. Because when you've spent long enough feeling like an empty seat at your own table, you start to crave anything that makes you feel real again, even if it's borrowed, even if it costs you everything. Have you ever wanted something only to realize once it was in front of you, you were never meant to have it? That maybe the wanting was the only real part, and the having just broke everything. Sometimes I sit in the quiet now, in the space where Theodore used to be, where laughter used to echo, where I thought I knew who I was. And I wonder, was I wrong for saying yes, or was I finally being honest with what I felt? Was I selfish or just starved? Because there's a kind of hunger that doesn't live in your body. It lives in your soul. It gnaws at the parts of you no one sees. And if someone finally does, even for a second, you reach for it. Even if it costs you more than you can afford. Please tell me in the comments, was it betrayal?